My name's Sharon Bolton, and this is my latest book, Dead Woman Walking. I got the idea a couple of years ago when we were on holiday in Africa, and we were lucky enough to take a hot air balloon flight one morning over the Serengeti National Park. And as we drifted quite low, watching the wildlife on the ground, it struck me that when the burners aren't firing, hot air balloons are completely silent, and that someone on the ground might not even know they were there. So I got to thinking, suppose passengers in a balloon saw something terrible happening. What would they do? Well, in Dead Woman Walking, that's exactly how the story starts. There are 13 people taking a balloon flight over the Northumberland National Park quite early in the morning. Two of them are sisters, Jessica and Isabel Lane. Jessica has bought the flight as a surprise birthday present for her older sister. And as they drift quite low over an old ruined house, they spot something on the ground that doesn't look right. A man and a woman, and it appears that the man is hitting the woman quite viciously, quite savagely over the head with a rock. What do? They're up in the sky. At first, the man has no idea they're there. But the woman sees them and she screams, and he turns. And he realises that the crime that should have remained hidden for all time has actually been witnessed by 13 people. Well, he has a gun and he uses it, and there is a dreadful accident. There's just one survivor, one woman, and she has to go on the run because she's seen the killer's face, but he's also seen hers. And there then follows a chase across Northumberland, across the north of England, and as the story unfolds, we start to ask ourselves, who and what is this woman really frightened of? What I'd like to do now is read the opening couple of pages. The balloon hung in the air like an inverted Christmas bauble. Its voluptuous, candy-striped sphere reflected perfectly in the lake. In the early light, the water glowed with the colours of a ripe peach. Pale gold towards its edges, a deeper, richer pink at its heart. There was no wind, no sound. The trees along the shoreline had ceased their pre-dawn rustling, and none of the balloon's 13 passengers was either moving or speaking. The world seemed to be holding its breath. Below, as far as the passengers could see in every direction, lay the vast, heather-swept moorland of the Northumberland National Park. Acres of grasses rippled like the pelt of a huge waking animal. Streams shimmered like silver snakes, and the burning sunrise set the hilltops on fire. The landscape was vast, wild, unchanged in hundreds of years, as though the balloon had become a time machine, floating them back to when the far north of England was home to even fewer people than it is now. They could see no roads, no train lines, no towns or villages. But for the 13 of them, the world seemed empty. The basket was large and rectangular, as is common with pleasure flights, and subdivided into 4 sections to restrict onboard movement of the passengers. The pilot had his own space in the centre of the rectangle. In one of the compartments were 2 women in their mid to late 30s, one wearing black, the other green. The 2 were not quite alike enough to be twins, but obviously sisters. The one in black breathed out a soft bubble of sound, too audible to be a sigh, too happy to be a moan. "You're welcome," the sister in green smiled. The sisters were sharing their compartment with an accountant from Dunstable. His wife and 2 teenage children were in the one adjacent. On the other side of the pilot were 3 men on a hiking holiday, dressed like traffic lights in red, orange and green anoraks, a middle-aged couple from Scotland, and a retired journalist. The basket continued its slow, lazy spiral as they drifted above the lake. The constant movement had been one of the biggest surprises of the experience, as had the feel of the air at altitude. It was sharper somehow and fresher than it ever felt on the ground. Cool, but not uncomfortably so in the way that frosty mornings are. This air tingled against the skin, fizzed its way down to lungs. The woman in green, Jessica, edged closer to her sister, whose face had grown pale and whose hands were clutching the rim of the basket. Her eyes, staring directly down at the water's surface, were wide with wonder. Jessica was suddenly disturbed by the most alarming thought. that her sister might be about to jump out. A short while later, she was to think it might have been better if both of them had jumped, that 1 or 2 petrifying seconds and a painful encounter with the water's surface wouldn't have been so bad. The cool, choking blackness might have finished them off, but equally might have buoyed them up and carried them to shore. Had they leapt at that point, they might both have lived.